Welcome to Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas podcast. We get started with every episode with a saying of the day. Chancellor, what do you have for us today?
This is a good one. It's pretty funny. Doing nothing is hard to do because you don't know when you're finished. And and that ties in with the story that came out of Spain this week. A guy had been absent from work. He had skipped his job for 6.5 years, and they'd paid him the whole time, and he never went to work. Somebody in that organization is going to suffer from that. I don't know if it's CFO or the auditor or whom, but they're going to have some problems. As brought to my attention, in Spain, there was a guy that he skipped work, and they were still paying him, but he skipped for 6.5 years before they caught on and stopped paying him. 6.5 years never going to work and still getting paid. If I were the CFO, I would be in fear of what might be happening to me next, or the auditor. Someone messed up on that other person he reported to. Remember, last summer we had the one in Phoenix where the lady was dead and died on Thursday or Friday, and they didn't she was in the office at her desk, and they didn't realize that she had died at the desk until the next week. And I always felt sorry for her on that. That's a bad way to go, that your fellow workers don't even know that you're dead. That's not good. What I was going to talk about today, we've had less than a month of President Trump, and he's been like a whirlwind, doing something every day and several times a day. And I was just writing down some of them. You looked at the executive orders that he signed the first day. He was repealing most, if not all, the things that Biden had done. And I thought most of Biden's president executive orders would not be upheld, would not be constitutional. He was trying to get things that would be law. So, he's doing away with them. That may wind up in the courts, but he did a lot. He started off withdrawing from organizations. And, he withdrew from the World Health Organization, WHO. And World Health Organization is reported that we had spent $500 million with them, helping them, do their job. And of course, they were always against us. And China had spent 35, and they've got, 5 times as many people as we have. And then also he withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord. I've always said they ought to have a Washington Accord and just get everybody in the world together and say, y'all just adopt our pollution rules and we'll be fine. Because we have harder rules than anyone else, and have continued. I think our rivers and streams and air is cleaner than it's been in probably 50 years. That we do a good job in the United States, and that others ought to be adopting ours rather than us adopting the Paris Climate Accord, which put such stringent rules and regulations on our industry, it would have bankrupted the country. And it exempt India and China for most of those. China's building 1 coal plant a day. They're moving full speed ahead. And so I think he did the right thing there. And it remains to see what will happen. DEI, he was all over that, and President Trump, and said it should stop. And he ordered all DEI organizations within any cabinet position or any agency to be set aside, and that people be judged only on their merits if they're qualified for the job. And that was the number one thing. The transgender orders, those were controversial, but look, he had a press conference at the White House. And he had this girl, the swimmer, Riley Gaines, and a bunch of other girls that were looked like they were anywhere from 7 or 8 years of age up to their 20s, and said that, if you're born a male, you're only going to participate in male sports. If you're born a female, only in female sports, which makes sense. And if they want to start another category, they can start another category. But let's don't have men that are born as men come in and all of a sudden say that they think they're a woman and therefore they should participate in women's sports. It would have just killed the effectiveness of Title IX. And so he made a big step for women's sports, and that was very interesting to see. The Democrats, and I don't know what, at some point in time, there's that old expression, stop digging. And the issues they took on this week was one, the transgender, and they blasted him for it. That's one that the polls show, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, 80 to 90% of the people agree with what he did. That if you're born a male, you can't go over and participate in women's sports. There were some other things that came up that that he changed in the USAID office. Elon Musk, his engineers went after that one, and they just laid out where they've been spending their money. And one of them was Politico, which is a newspaper and news organization in Washington, very liberal, and I understand why. Biden administration through USAID gave $8 million for subscriptions, and I don't know how many copies got out or what, but maybe that. It's hard to say that you're going to be fair if you're getting paid by one side or the other, and it was really an eye opener on what all the USAID officers have spent their money. If it's one thing to build a highway in Guatemala or something like that, I might still be against it, but I'd understand a little more than having a drag queen dance someplace, or there were so many woke items in that USAID budget. And so if you're going to help somebody, and I'm not sure we should, you need to get something out of it. There needs to be something they can see where they can say the U.S. did that.
I'm curious. A lot of the response to the spending at USAID has been, well, it's just a tiny little part of the overall budget. It's just a drop in the bucket. What's your response to that?
It's like when Rudy Giuliani got elected mayor, he started enforcing laws that kept people from doing writing on buildings and and things like that. And they said, well, that's not that big a deal. He said, people need to remember, if the law says you can't do it, then we're going to prosecute. We're going after you. And so I think that's what he's doing, is making an example. USAID, nickels and dimes make quarters, and we need to always remember that. And if they're spending a little here and a little there, that's my money. That's your money. It's taxpayers' money. And they should not be spending it on a drag queen show in some other country, in the Congo or Guatemala or wherever. They spent $22 million on Sesame Street in Iraq. How about doing some reruns? Just do reruns. That's not going to cost 20-something million dollars. Whoever came up with that idea,
Right.
they're sitting around and they're probably going to have less than 100 employees here within the next couple of months. And I think they could do with 3 or 4, and they could figure out, number one, are we going to continue getting any money from Congress? Number two, if we do, how are we going to spend it? And go from there. But they had a ton of people working over there, and it was just awful what all they wasted money on. The president also did away with the catch and release program with illegal aliens. and that if they're undocumented, they broke the law, they're in here, you don't catch them, release, you catch them and deport them. And that Mexico, as a result of some things he said, they reinstated their program that you have to remain in Mexico to be able to apply for asylum, and that will cut down on a lot of the people fleeing in. But everybody's saying this is going to be the end of the world if he catches all the illegal aliens and sends them back. What they've been doing is going to jails and getting the ones that are here illegally that broke the law and send them back. And it they had a little fight with Colombia over it, and the Colombia president said he was going to do such and such, and then they explained to him what Trump was going to do if he did, and he reached a compromise. Instead of us having to fly the criminals down there, they'll fly up here and get them. So as a great compromise, it helped us, save a lot of money. And he also did something on the January 6th people that had gotten convictions. None of those people were indicted or charged with insurrection. And that's what you read in the newspaper. That's what it was. Well, they got them on different laws that had been around for a long period of time, disrupting a meeting or whatever. And they were pretty harsh on them. And, if you're a conservative and you do something in Washington, D.C., in the Washington, D.C. court system, they're going to be rough on you. And so he pardoned those people. And, in before he did, when Biden was still in, he pardoned like 2,700 people that were drug use and nonviolent. Well, the first one that got arrested was in Lubbock. And Lubbock was looking for, and the guy got out there and he got arrested. And he had his release was that he wasn't supposed to be involved in drugs, and he was highly, uh, involved in drugs and failed his test. They arrested him on the side because that's what he had agreed, to that as part of the release.
Mm-hmm.
And but that was he lasted 7 days. Biden was saying these are people that have drug offenses. The guy had been charged with assault before. He had had some violence, but his last conviction had been on drugs, and so a lot happening there. Also, President Trump asked federal workers, if they wanted to retire and retire early and get paid full pay through September. And they had some that wanted to do it. We've had others that didn't, and that'll probably wind up being finalized at the Supreme Court. But most businesses, when you see a merger of businesses, you'll see a buyout of former employees of one of the businesses. And they're trying to cut down on the size of the organization. And that's what he is trying to do, is cut down on the size of the federal bureaucracy. And he's also worked on tariffs, and a lot of people have different opinions on tariffs. He had 25% on Mexico and 25% on Canada. And to get around those, they're going to have to show, number one, that they're stopping people from coming in. They're going to have troops or something, keep them from invading the United States from the north or the south. And the other thing they're going to have to do is that as they pass new laws and regulation and enforcements of criminal laws on drug trafficking, they got to really be tough. Fentanyl was coming in big time from Canada. And so the Canadians have their work cut out for them. But we have a lot of companies in Canada, and I think the president will look at this, that they may have hundreds of employees in the United States. They may have manufacturing in Canada, but distribution and sales and everything may be in the United States. And so, 80% of the imports in Montana come from Canada. And so they'll look at that, and that may be a bargaining power, but at some point in time, he will come up with some tariff, and it'll have some exemptions, but not many, in my opinion. He feels strongly about that.
Chancellor, a lot of talk right now about shutting down the Department of Education, taking those funds and spreading them out across the states. As your experience in education, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, going back to the Department of Education, it was created by Jimmy Carter. And I was in Congress and I voted against creating it. And after Reagan got elected, I introduced a bill to abolish it.
Hmm.
And that education, that the bureaucracy at that level spends so much that the money doesn't get to the people that need it. And in the past, that if we were going to give, any federal monies in education, we send it to the states and let them distribute it. And that's what Trump's planning on doing. Education department, you'd spend almost more on filling out the forms than you would getting the actual money. And so, education, it needs to be a state and local issue. It's paid for by property taxes. It's a local situation, and it should be up to local government. I'm all for him abolishing. I don't think they did anything to help education over the last 30, 40 years.
They certainly don't have much of a case to argue because latest studies, the United States came in dead last on education, but came in first on amount of money spent per pupil. So you're spending the most money and getting the least results. It's tough to have a case that you should stay open.
Right, absolutely, and that's the biggest problem. I mentioned the tariffs on foreign policy. That's a big part of his foreign policy. And also, he made, when Netanyahu was here and they had a press conference, he talked about the Gaza Strip. And at one time talked about, well, I'm just making the French Riviera. I
Yeah.
think it's going to take a long time to make that French Riviera. But he, he, is, he has talked to Putin about the Ukraine, and maybe he can talk him into something. I think Putin is at a point that he would like to get out, or he should, because they've had so many young Russians killed and in the fighting, and so many Ukraine. But a lot of the people in Russia that they're not happy with their governments. The mothers seeing their son sent off to war, they don't even know what the war is about, and getting the notice that he's been killed in action. So what he's doing in foreign relations, um, we'll find out before long because he'll make
Mhm.
an announcement. And but I think Trump, he's an active guy, and he gets up early and stays up late, and he's a hands-on leader, and so he's going to be. This is not just a whirlwind of the first 30 days or something like that. He's going to be very uh, engaged all along. He even got involved in names, and I thought it was kind of funny. He said the Gulf of Mexico, they're not going to get along with us. We'll call it the Gulf of America. And there's some mount companies have already changed that.
Mhm.
So we'll see what happens. And then in Mount McKinley, President Obama changed that to Denali, and he moved that back to Mount McKinley, and the tallest mountain in Alaska. This last week there were some Democrats that were saying that these plane crashes were all uh, the fault of Trump. Well, it's a little early to try to say. The one in Washington, the one in Philadelphia, and then one in Alaska. Those things, they've got explanation each one. But Democrats are in fights with Republicans, but they picked the main two fights they picked to fight big and open about is the transgender, which polls show 80-90% of the people on Trump's side on that, and also the issue of the USAID. And the spending that they uncovered in that area is just ridiculous. There's no way somebody can really justify that. And I noticed that Biden's press secretary, one of his press secretaries, one of his first ones, said that we shouldn't die on these hills. We need to find something that that the public may be on our side. But the transgender issue, and I think that one, and all the other things that they put that the USAID, those two issues, it just doesn't seem like it makes sense for me to me that you should get involved in those two to to be the ones you're going to go on an all-out war because the public's not on your side.
How great was President Trump's the optics when he signed that executive order uh, disallowing, making it that only you had to play in sports that you were assigned at birth, with all those kids, all those girls surrounding him and saving women's sports. The optics of it were fantastic.
I thought they were. I mean, it just showed what he was doing. And you look at a lot of the older women in sports and the leaders, they had fought hard for Title IX back in the
Mhm.
70s. And some of them, they were liberal and therefore they felt like they shouldn't say anything. They didn't want to offend any of the transgender people. Some of them weren't liberal or conservative. They just knew that it wasn't fair for a man to participate in women's sports and come into their dressing rooms with them.
Mhm.
It's just a common decency. One other thing that President Trump has done, declared an emergency as far as energy is concerned, and the strategic emergency oil reserve. He's going to have that filled back up. It was used to try to bring the price of gasoline down during the election last summer, late summer, and didn't work, and didn't bring prices down enough that anyone would even or care to notice about them. But he made that as one of the big ones also. I think he's going to continue. Hey, when he was a developer, he had a deal going every minute. He had a deal going everywhere. His book, the book on Trump, The Art of a Deal, I read that book and I understood ever since then. I've kind of understood what he was doing because he's a deal maker, and he's always trying to do something and he'll throw something out there. Well, and it's ridiculous and maybe somebody will back off. But when Mexico acted like they were not going to cooperate with us and there's going to be, he just started talking about those 25% tariffs. If you put a 25% tax on every good coming in from Mexico, well, there'd be a lot of people couldn't and wouldn't buy their goods. So it would really hurt their economy. And the Canadians believe this. They've been very good friends, and I think Trudeau put them in a terrible position as far as the President Trump was concerned. Trudeau is not someone that is philosophically on board with President Trump. He's a long way off from him, and I think that didn't help. Depending on what happens to the election in, I think it's May in Canada, we'll see who's going to be their leader. And Canada's they've got very liberal people on the east side and on the west at Vancouver, but in the middle, Alberta, the state of Alberta is kind of like Texas North. That's kind of like North Texas. It's oil and gas, and they're conservative, and they vote that way and they live that way. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that regard. I'd say in closing today, the saying of the day is doing nothing is hard because you don't know when you finish. And it goes back to the story that I mentioned first, and that is that the guy for 6.5 years didn't go to work and still got paid. Took him a long time to figure that one out. And the best thing to do is go to work and do such a good job that they feel like they can't live without you.